Hey YouTube, Bill here for part 2 of hard cider making.
Our cider seems to be done fermenting. That means it's bottling time. So the first step to bottling is if you want still cider, you don't have to do this step. That means that it's not fizzy. If you want it to be fizzy, you need priming sugar. This is just pure corn sugar. It's super clean sugar. It has no extra taste. So you need about 1 ounce per gallon of cider. We have 5 gallons of cider. That means 5 ounces of priming sugar. We're going to dissolve that in 2 cups of water. We're going to bring it to a boil and boil it for about 5 minutes. Now for our specialized equipment, we need 1 sanitizing bucket. This happens to be a Rubbermaid trash can. It's white, so it's theoretically should be food safe. We need a bottling brush if you need to scrub out your bottles. This would have been better before I got all the bubbles on it, but this is to transfer from our fermenting vessel into our bottling bucket. It's just a siphon tube. You can set this so that it pulls off just off the bottom, and that will keep the sludge from the bottom from coming up. And then we need a bottling tube. This is a neat little thing, and you'll see that later. That goes on the nozzle of the bottling bucket. And of course we have our bottling bucket, which has a valve here, and that's our sanitizer that's in there now. I'm going to wet the surface of everything, make sure that there's absolutely every single surface is wet before I dump it out, by way of I'm going to drain some through the valve. The surface needs to stay wet for at least 1 minute to sanitize. If you don't want to stick your hands in acid water, you can just use gloves or a sponge, cloth, anything like that. You can also mix this up in a spray bottle if you're so inclined. So as I said, I'm going to drain some of the sanitizer through the valve to sanitize the inside of the valve. It doesn't need much, just some. Now we let our bucket air dry, and the next step is imperative. We need to make absolute certain that every single thing gets submerged, filled inside and out with water, sanitizer. And then we'll put everything aside to let it air dry. Now 2 other pieces of equipment we'll need. Some way to dry the bottles. This is called a bottling tree. The bottles fit on there, just like that, to let them drain. And then of course we need the bottles. For 5 gallons of cider or beer, you'll need roughly 50 to 60 bottles. 5 gallons is a rough approximation, so usually it's 50 bottles for 5 gallons, but sometimes it's more. Sometimes you don't get the full 5 gallons out. Sometimes you do a 6-gallon brew and you get the full 5 gallons out. So the process is as simple as watching them sink. You want them to sink vertically, and they need to stay underwater for at least a minute, inside and out. If you're starting with clean bottles or new bottles, that's all you have to do. If you're starting with used bottles or otherwise dirty bottles, you'll need to use the bottle brush. My bottles are pretty clean. I'm going to check them as I go. We have a full bottle tree. We have a few extra bottles still in the sanitizer because there's just not enough room on the bottle tree. Now we're ready to transfer over our cider to our bottling bucket. One thing to be sure of when you're doing this, you need to have the top of your bottling bucket needs to be below the bottom of your fermenting vessel in order to keep the siphon going, which is why we have the tube here. The other thing to be aware of is you need this slightly turned so that it sits flat, because the bottom of this will actually stick down off of it, and if you start filling your bucket, you'll snap off your valve. Okay, there's our cider. Smells very cidery. So the idea with this is we want to actually put this down so that it holds it on the edge of the bucket. Touch it to the bottom, and then pull it back up. You just need it about an inch off the bottom. Now, we need to start our siphon. If you have a suction bulb, you can use that. I don't, so I'm going to just do it the old-fashioned way by using mouth suction. And there we go. I popped off my bucket. I think I also pressed the tube to the bottom of the bucket as I was trying to just get that back on there, because it's a little murky down there. But that's okay. It'll settle out in the bottle and it'll come out clear. There's one step I forgot. We're going to take a quick sample to get our gravity reading with our hydrometer. Alright, let's see if we can get this here. So we're looking at the 1.0 line. I'm going to drop it in. Let it free float. So it's 1.002. Alright, you can see all the sludge left at the bottom. Let me come over here and we check. We got right around the 4-gallon mark. So that's what I was saying, is we might not need 50 or 60 bottles. We might need less, and that's what it looks like we're going to need. And I almost forgot, we wouldn't have fizzy cider if we didn't put in our priming sugar. I should have done that at the beginning so it would have mixed thoroughly, but we shall just sanitize a spoon and mix it up the hard way. As I said, we got this cool bottling wand here. It's got a little spring-loaded tip, and there's a little valve in there. And when you push up on the bottom, it lets the liquid out. And when you take off the top, it stops the liquid. So in theory, with this on there, I should be able to open that. I gotta turn it a little bit so it's pointing out. The tube's a little bent up here. So we filled up the tube with cider, and now it's totally fine. Now, the process is, as you work your way down, you get to the bottom of the bottle, you push up, you start to fill it. Now, as you're going, it fills up, and it'll keep filling up, and you want to stop right when it gets to the top of the neck, right about there. Now, as you take the bottle out, tube out, you draw back, and it's got exactly the right amount of excess space in the bottle for air. So now, as our last step, we have our bottle cap. You can't reuse bottle caps, you got to purchase new ones. These are oxygen absorbing ones. And we have our capper here. Take it, it's magnetic, put it over, push down, and now our bottle is sealed. So I ended up with not quite 48 bottles. I put 5 of them over in a cabinet just so I have easy access to them. The rest of these are going to go in my cellar, and these will sit for probably 3 weeks or so untouched. The 5 that I put in my cabinet upstairs, I'll actually try one in about a week. If it's not good yet, then I'll try it again another like 3 or 4 days, and I'll keep trying it until I see when it's good.